In fact, there's very little evidence to suggest at all that whatever is out there for benevolent reasons. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's out there for malevolent reasons, but to say that, oh, they're here to help us from what, that's pure conjecture.
Welcome back to another episode of Strange Normal. My name is Brad Burnham. We do a lot of monitoring the strange events that happen in your life, specifically, recently, UAPs, and the strange events that have been happening in the news with regard to the United States. Now, what I want to recap real quick is we've been going over what Lou Elizondo has been talking about and taking little snippets from some of his podcasts to analyze where we are at in history, because we really know what's happening here. It's almost as if we know the future, and you can know that too if you watch the documentary on this channel called Starfall. It is fascinating what's happening from a Christian perspective with these UAPs and UFO things that have been declassified and the government is saying are real. What's really strange is to hear Lou Elizondo talk about these things as if it's been here the whole time and they've known about these things forever, because they have. Let's look at some of the most interesting clips from his topic. We're specifically going to go over what is a threat, what is communicating, and how have they been baiting these UFOs. You've probably seen in my previous episode, I uploaded, I think it was called the Hollywood's Most Accurate UFO Scene, and they talk about baiting UFOs. You should go back and watch that if you haven't, or watch it right after this video, because we're going to be talking about it at the end of this video. But now I want you to see what Lou Elizondo has to say about this potential threat, and I believe I agree with him on this.
Lou, I've watched some of the conversations on different forums and chat communities across the internet, and something I keep seeing are a small percentage of people who accuse you of pushing a threat narrative, accusing you of twisting the topic to an evil aliens on the verge of invading Earth, rather than a more peaceful reason for a non-human presence being here. And the justification is usually written that if they wanted to do that, they would have entered into conflict with us a long time ago. What would you like to say to address this point and the individuals accusing you of that?
For those just starting out in this channel, we look at this through a Christian perspective, but Lou is not necessarily going to take this through a Christian perspective. He's looking at it through all angles because he has a very wide audience. He claims to be a Christian, but he also has left the Pentagon because his Christian superiors have said that they don't want to have anything to do with these things, and they don't want to reveal what they are and what they believe they are because they believe they are demonic. I happen to agree with what they're saying, what the highest levels of the Pentagon say, but Lou does not. However, Lou is taking a very careful stance on this, and I totally agree with what he's saying. But he's saying, I don't know what they are. That's where our ideas differ. Now listen to this.
Sure. I mean, I'm a national security guy. My job was always paid to be paranoid and trust but verify. I'm not asking you necessarily to accept the threat narrative because, I'm not sure there's a threat narrative there. What I'm simply asking people to do is remain fair and objective. Look, here's the bottom line. Anybody out there who says, oh, well, they're here for peaceful purposes and they're here to stop us from annihilating ourselves from nuclear technology, the bottom line is you're completely ill-informed. That's the bottom line. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I don't mean any offense by it, but let's look at real facts and scenarios here. In 1945, the U.S. government, us, vaporized over 500,000 individuals instantly during the dropping of the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We literally transitioned human beings from a solid state to a gaseous state. Nowhere were UAPs there to stop that from happening and annihilating each other. In fact, nowhere were there UAPs stopping World War I or World War II or the Korean War or Vietnam. In fact, nowhere were there UAPs stopping COVID or global climate change or world hunger, right? Nowhere did the UAP stop our development into the nuclear age. In fact, nowhere did UAPs stop us from going to war in World War II or Korean War or Vietnam. They haven't stopped us right now with Ukraine. They haven't stopped COVID. They haven't stopped global climate change. They haven't stopped global famine. So to suggest that a UAP may be here for the benefit of mankind, that really has yet to be seen. We haven't seen any. Now, what we have seen is absolute preparation of the battlefield. We've seen things looking at our capabilities, military capabilities, nuclear capabilities. That we have seen. What does that mean? We don't know yet. So I say that just as a word of caution for anybody out there who wants, to follow the strain of, they're here and they want to sing Kumbaya and teach us. Well, okay, maybe, but they haven't really done anything yet overtly to help our species out in a way that we can publicly recognize.
So let's talk about this just for a second. What he's actually saying here is, they haven't demonstrated anything yet, but what if they did? And if they did, maybe that would change our minds about it, hint, hint. Now, I'm sure he's not communicating directly to them, but by hinting at that, it's setting into people's minds that if these things were to come and say, hey, we can provide you with technology, we can provide you with healing abilities, we can provide you with all kinds of things. Remember, Satan has a counterfeit for everything Jesus does, and Jesus was and is called the healer. So I wouldn't be surprised if these things come and they say, hey, we have amazing technology. We want to provide you with the ability to cure cancer, cure all these diseases, get rid of the pandemics in your life. We have cures for all this stuff because we've seen it all before. Can you imagine if that were to happen? People would just say all these things, they're here to save us. They're wonderful. They're absolutely magnificent. We need to listen to them and everything. They're so wise. Theirs becomes the problem.
In fact, there's very little evidence to suggest at all that whatever is out there for benevolent reasons. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's out there for malevolent reasons, but to say that, oh, they're here to help us from that's pure conjecture. That's horseshit. Yeah, that's just someone spewing off their opinion without any facts or data at all to suggest that. What we do know is that there seems to be a keen interest in our nuclear and military capabilities, and not just us, but around the world. That does seem to be pretty clear.
Okay, that does seem to be pretty clear. In a previous episode on this channel, we kind of went over this and talked a little bit about the nuclear interest that these things have. And I believe that this is part of the final deception where these things come down. And it has been said through other means that these things are trying to tell us that they are a peaceful race and they want to try to get rid of this nuclear problem that we've had. And we are a terrible species that has decided to just destroy our enemies, our neighbors, and in a way, that's correct. But how does Satan always work? He always works in half-truths, right? So yeah, we are terrible people. Yeah, we need to correct ourselves. Yeah, we shouldn't destroy our neighbor. We should turn the other cheek. But on the other hand, these things are not here to give us joy. They're not here to provide us a solution. They are here to deceive us, and we're going to find that out at the last moment. Now, watch what happens next.
So, you can fill in the blanks what it means. Now, does it mean that they're here for hostile intent? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that they're here for a threat? No, it doesn't. But what it simply means is that there's no evidence to suggest that they're here for anything humanitarian. So, does that mean that they're here for hostile reasons? Not necessarily. Does it mean that they're here like we are when we go out to, let's say, the African plains and the Serengeti and monitor the wildebeest migration? Maybe they're just here to observe. We don't know. We simply don't know enough yet about this enigma to have a cogent conversation about it. We're just now at the point where we've recognized that they're real as a U.S. government. So anybody out there who wants to insert their narrative or preconceived notion of what this is, I think it's premature. And frankly, I think it's irresponsible. And especially people who go out there and start peddling, things to suggest that when there's absolutely zero empirical data that supports that finding.
So he's kind of talking to two different parties right now. He's kind of talking to the party that's watching this channel right now, and he was also talking to the party that's a UFOlogist. Because UFOlogists have been notoriously saying that these things are benevolent, they're nice, they're good, and they need to be listened to. And perhaps people have had downloads or dreams and visions about these things that have told them so. That is what people have come out and said. But it can't, just like he said, it's conjecture too. You can't, people have had some strange things happen to them. That's part of the fact, but you can't verify that. And that's the hard part. On the other hand, what he has said is just like his superiors, he has had people that comes up to him and says, well, these things are bad. You can't go after them. You shouldn't talk to them. That is what I believe. And that's what I believe everybody should think about before they even think about contacting these things. And if you haven't seen the reasons why I believe these things, you should watch Starfall on my channel. Let's continue.
So let's be real. Let's have a real conversation here. That's my perspective anyways. Again, I'm not trying to fear monger or scare anybody, but I am here to provide real data, and I'm sorry that data doesn't comport to your preconceived narrative or what your opinion is or what you're trying to sell people.
You're right. We simply don't know. We can only observe their behaviors.
Now that's fascinating to me because he's so forward with this and saying just, we know about this already. The government has released this and we are very interested in what's going on here. There is no doubt that there has been what the ufologists call a disclosure that has already happened. And it's a slow disclosure, but they're saying, hey, these things are real, we don't know what they are, and we haven't known what they are for decades. So what's happening now is a serious problem. And it's all falling in line with the final deception that Roger Murnau says will take the world by surprise and people will just eat this stuff. So the question is, what is it communicating? Let's find out.
There's a difference between threat, a biological threat, and hostile intent. And we have to separate the two, because hostile intent isn't necessarily the same as a threat. As I've said before, I have to fly to California, for example, tomorrow. And when I go to the airport and I sit there and I'm, have a cocktail or something or get on the plane, there's no real threat by that 737. But yet, if I go outside and I run on the tarmac and I put my head behind the jet engine while it's taxiing, well, now it's a threat. I'm going to get burned. I'm probably going to lose my hearing. Is it the jet's fault? No. It's just that I happen to be, at the wrong place at the wrong time when certain technology is being applied in a certain way. Is that what we're dealing with here? Well, there seems to be enough anecdotal information to suggest, yes, that there is a threat. Whether there's hostile intent yet remains to be seen. And I think we have to, pay attention. Now, if we can substantiate that people are actually being taken away from their own free will, then I'd say, yeah, then this is a different conversation. Then we've got to really have that conversation in earnest.
Whoa. Okay, what he alluded to there was that these abduction scenarios that people have been talking about, where they have these dreams and visions or what they think are real things happen to them at night or in the daytime, where they are taken up into the ship, probed, and doing terrible things to them and put back. Some people have even said they have had pregnancies and they have had surgeries on these quote-unquote ships. But we know that they are dreams and visions, basically, of being put inside these things, and they come back and they say something terrible has happened. What's amazing about this, though, is that everyone that has claimed the name of Jesus Christ has been immediately ejected from these dreams and visions. Isn't that fascinating? And to learn more about that specific story, look at Joe Jordan's video on my channel. It's really interesting in the information he provides.
We have nuclear capabilities, right? We've got weapons and propulsion, and we have military technology. When you fly a UAP over controlled U.S. airspace, and despite throwing the very best at it that we got, we still can't keep up with it. We can't engage it, and it just pops out of existence, or it appears to, anyways. That is communicating potentially an intent that, look, there is this technology out there that far exceeds yours, and there's not a thing you can do about it. We do it all the time when the Russians send a reconnaissance aircraft too close to the United States. What do? We scramble a couple F-16s or F-22s, and it's on the front page of CNN and Fox News, right? And we're not talking to them, but we're communicating an intent. Look, you come much further, we will shoot you down, and vice versa. They do it to us. So there's lots of ways to communicate intent and capabilities, and that's what we're trying to figure out. We're having a conversation right now, but if I go like this to you, I'm still communicating something to you. Communicating hello, right? There's lots of ways to communicate. It doesn't have to be verbal. We always think that we'll sit down at a table and we're going to negotiate. Well, yeah, that's human terms. But I communicate with my dog all the time. My dogs communicate with me when they're hungry. They're not sitting down and saying, "Hey, Pops, I'm hungry. Fill up the bowl with food." What they do is they whine, they pace, they'll kind of look at the ball. Maybe they'll kick it around with their foot. Make no mistake, they're communicating loud and clear their intent. They want to eat, and so and I understand very clearly what they're trying to communicate. So we need to think in terms of that as well. What is communication? Is light a form of communication? Well, we do it with fiber optic all the time. Is presence a communication? Yeah, sure. Again, we do it all the time. You can see it on the front page of the news just about every week or so. So that would be my response.
So what he's saying here is that regardless of whether they're talking to you, they are communicating. Their presence is communicating something. The fact that they are faster at us is communicating something. The fact that they are able to outrun our jets, they're able to outmaneuver our missiles, our guns, our bullets, says something. It says, hey, you know what? I'm still here, and you guys can't do anything about it. That's communicating intent. That's not necessarily communicating a benevolent intent, but it's definitely communicating something. So what are they interested in? Why are they here? Well, that's an even more interesting topic we're going to talk about right now.
Speaking, you mentioned nuclear, and I know you've talked about it, and I don't know if you can go any further about baiting and luring UFOs. You mentioned it on Christina Gomez's show the other day, how you successfully did that in ATIP, and someone online mentioned it was related to neutrinos, and somebody I know, a source, said, no, it's not neutrinos. The way we attract and coax UAP has to do with nuclear power, nuclear weapon sites, deployed weapons, or nuclear fuel being moved around, weapons being manufactured, nuclear fuel being manufactured and manufacturing sites, and that attracts them.
Look at the smirk on his face.
Your friend seems to be pretty well informed. I'm not going to expound on too much on that. But yeah, there seems to be a definitive interest in our nuclear technologies.
Isn't that interesting? A definitive interest in our nuclear technologies. That's what a government official, former government official, Lou Elizondo, says. So that's really fascinating. Because here's the thing. This is how I see this playing into the final times. These things calm down and they say, hey, you've just used a nuclear weapon, or we've saved you from a nuclear blast, or something has happened that involves nuclear weapons and we want to stop this. Number one, they've communicated that they're benevolent. Supposedly, right? Number two, they've communicated, hey, we're here to help you. Let's help you do something here. And number three, they've instantly won the friendship of anybody that they've come to. Isn't that fascinating? So maybe the whole deception revolves around the nuclear beginning of the whole deception. So the deception happens, they win our friendship, they deceive us, and then they ask us to do something that's completely against God's will, which is the final chapters of the book of the Bible. If you read in chapter 13 of Revelation, the last bit of it talks about worship. And if you don't worship this beast, his way, you die. That is the final test, folks. The final test. Everyone gets hung up on the 666 and the mark of the beast and all this stuff, but they completely miss the part where it says worship. That's the final test. Not the mark, not all this other stuff. It's all about worship. Because we know in Isaiah, it talks about how Satan wanted worship. These things, these glowing orbs that we call UAPs, are fallen angels. No matter if they are projecting this thing or if they are actually this round object, they are fallen angels, folks, and they want your worship. They want to be recognized as something superior and receive your friendship. Not just your friendship, but your worship. And that's what it's going to come down to. And we are so near the end of time. Let's continue.
There's probably a really good reason for it. That was explored to some degree in ATIP. And I'm hoping to provide more fidelity in the book that I write on some of the theories and mathematics involved in that.
Interesting. So what we know is Lou's writing a book and he's going to provide more detail in there. If you enjoy this content, please share it. Please subscribe to my channel and continue to watch what is happening in your world with this topic, because it is going to be a wild ride from here on out. I can imagine that we're going to be having this conversation for a few more years until something big happens. And then it's going to be a whole new discussion. Stay tuned, friends, and I'll see you later.